Alright, what is up you guys, and welcome back to the Progressive Skills in English Level 3 coursebook. In this video we're going to be going over the writing section as you guys have requested. So let's dive right in. We have exercise A, activating ideas. Sometimes a business cannot grow in its present location. For example, Acme Limited is considering relocation from the village of Coston to the city of Bellport. Study the map and the photographs above. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the photographs. So from what I can see, Coston is probably a village because of all you can see here in the picture. A lot of great scenes, a lot of greenery, and Bellport is probably a city, right? As you can see here, it's near the sea. So that means two things: that Coston is a lot nearer to the international airport than Bellport is. However, Bellport is closer to the sea, so these were some of the benefits of each location and some of the drawbacks as well. Obviously, one more thing I'd like to talk about is that Bellport is obviously bigger, so that could be potentially better for business, as cities tend to have larger population. That means more customers, etc. Okay, now let's move on to exercise B, but before we do that, let's take a look at the vocab box. Here we have benefit, drawback, fewer, finished goods, for and against, grow, incentive, less, present, raw materials, relocation, rent, salary, unemployment, unit, would rather. Okay, so now let's take a look at exercise B. Study the map and the table on page 167 and underline the best to complete each sentence below. Okay, so we're gonna dive to page 167 here. Let me just go quickly. Come on. Okay, so right here. So page 167, as you can see here, we have a table putting all the differences between Coston and Bellport. So we'll start off with the population. In Coston we have 10,000, while Bellport has over 125,000. Okay, so quite a massive difference. Unemployment rate in Coston is 3%, while the unemployment rate in Bellport is 10%. So quite high. Okay, average salary not specified. Skilled staff, well, they make around £15. I'm guessing this is in the UK. So skilled staff £15 per hour, while skilled staff make £20 an hour in Bellport. Unskilled staff make £7.80 per hour, while in Bellport they make $9.25 per hour. Availability of premises, none. Well, not specified. Factory units are poor in Coston and they are good in Bellport. Shop units are good in Coston and poor in Bellport. Average rents, again, not specified. Factory units, £20 per square meter, while factory units are £50 per square meter. So you'll pay a lot more for the same size, if you will. Shop units, that'll be £15 per square meter and £35 per square in Bellport. Incentives, not specified. Relocation grant, none in Coston, while it is £2,000 in Bellport. And setup grant, again, none in Coston, but $10,000 in Bellport. Okay, so now let's go back like so. Let's go to the writing section. That's what we're here for. Okay, so now that we studied the map, okay, let's underline and complete each sentence. So we have 1, there are more/fewer people in Bellport than Coston. So we'll say there are more, okay? More people in Bellport than Coston, simply because Bellport is a city. 2, Bellport has more employment/unemployment than Coston. We'll say that Bellport has more unemployment, okay? Higher unemployment rate than Coston. 3, Bellport is a good location for importing raw materials/finished goods by sea. We'll say that Bellport is a good location for importing raw materials. Okay, where is it? Yeah, right here, for importing raw materials. 4, it is difficult to import/export finished goods by air from Bellport. Well, we'll say it is difficult to export, okay? Import means to bring in, export means to ship out. So export will be the one that we're looking for because Coston is a lot closer to the airport. So it is difficult to export finished goods by air from Bellport. 5, the average salary/rents is higher in Bellport than in Coston. We'll say the average salary is higher in Bellport than in Coston. 6, there are many shop/factory units for rent in Bellport. However, that will say there are many factory units for rent in Bellport. Shop rents are higher/lower in Bellport than Coston. Shop rents are, we'll say, higher in Bellport because Bellport is much more expensive than Coston. There are incentives to relocate in Bellport, such as setup grants/loans. That'll be grants. So there are incentives to relocate in Bellport, such as setup grants. Okay? Now let's take a look at exercise C, using new vocabulary. Imagine a company is thinking of relocating from Bellport to Coston. That is exactly the case that we're going to be talking about. Write 8 sentences about Coston and use the patterns in exercise B. So we want to use sentences with the same pattern as exercise B here. So he gave us an example. Coston has a much smaller population than Bellport. So now that you guys are a little bit more familiar with Bellport and Coston, I want you to write 7 sentences, and I'll give you my own as well, but these are not set in stone, so you could use your own if you want. Okay, so here I'll give you some. So I can say something like, there are fewer people in Coston than Bellport. 2, I could talk about employment and unemployment. So I'll say Coston has less unemployment than Bellport. Or I could also say Coston has more employment than Bellport. Okay? I could say Coston is not a good location for importing goods by sea because, like we said, Bellport is a lot closer. It's actually by the sea compared to Coston. Then I can also say it is easy to export finished goods by air from Coston because it is a lot closer to the airport. 5, I'll say the average salary is lower in Coston than in Bellport. Let's keep going. I'll say there are a few factory units to rent in Coston. Or I could also say there are many shop units to rent in Coston. And finally, I'll say shop rents are lower in Coston than Bellport. Okay, so these were my sentences. I hope you wrote your own. Now let's move on. Okay, so here we have exercise A. In the second part of this writing section, we have activating ideas. Why do companies relocate from one place to another? So write some sentences using the words in the box. Okay, so we want to talk about the general idea of why do companies relocate from one place to another using these words. So we have access, competition, customers, export, import, incentives, premises, salaries, and unemployment. Okay, so here we have an example. There is better access to a motorway, an airport, or a seaport. Okay, so he used the word access, as you can see. Now we want to use the word competition. Okay, so for competition, we'll say something like there is less competition in the area. Okay, just a simple sentence using the word competition that relates to companies relocating from one place to the next. Okay, so there is less competition in the area. What else do we have? We have customers. Okay, so I'll say there are more customers in the new location. Let me turn this off. So there are more customers in the new location. Let's keep going. Export. I'll say the location is better for exporting finished goods. Okay. Import. The location is better for importing raw materials. Okay, based on what we read about that company, Acme. 6. Excuse me. Incentives. Okay, so for incentives, we'll say there are government incentives. Premises, I'll say the rental costs for premises are lower. Okay, based on what we talked about between Costin and Bellport. Okay, I don't know why I stopped there for a second. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's talk about salaries now. So I'll say average salaries are not as high. And 9, unemployment, I can say something like the rate of unemployment is higher or much higher. Depends on what you're talking about. Anyway, let's keep going. B, gathering data. Study the information at the top of page 95 in your notebook and answer each question below in full sentence. Okay, well, let's take a look at the information that we are given here. We have a little bit more information about the company Acme Limited. So company type, it's an engineering company. Location, currently it's at Costin. Manager or managers, we have one, which is someone called Fred Goodwin. Workers, they have 3 skilled workers and 10 unskilled workers. Premises are about 5,000 square meters. Raw materials are imported by sea, and the limits to growth for that company is that they can't recruit skilled or unskilled staff, and they can't rent factory units. Now let's take a look at their graphs, their sales to Britain and exports in the year before last year, and this year. So sales to Britain the year before last were about 4,425 units. Exports were 580. Last year, it was 4,678 units exported, or not sales. Units, we'll say for exports, it was 976. This year, it was 5,320 units, while for exports, it was 1,800 units. Okay, so it's definitely steadily going up and up and up. So that's a good thing. Okay, now I think... should we read this or should we wait for a bit? Let's wait for a second. So let's gather some data and talk about exercise B for a second. So we have, what kind of company is Acme Limited? Acme Limited is a small engineering company. Pretty simple. We already knew that. Let's keep going. Where is the company located? Again, pretty simple. We talked about it. It is located in the town of Costin, which has a population of around 10,000, like we saw in the previous page. How many workers does the company employ? We'll say the company employs a total of 14 people, including 3 skilled workers and 10 unskilled workers. Okay. How large are the company premises? We'll say that the company occupies premises of around, I'll say, 5,000 square meters, as we can see here. Okay. How does the company get its raw materials? We'll say the company imports its raw materials by sea. 6. Who does the company sell finished goods to? We'll say that the company sells about 75% of its finished goods in Britain and exports 25% of its finished goods to Europe, as we can see here. So sales in Britain and then exports. Okay. 7. What has happened to sales in Britain this year? I'll say sales in Britain have increased from how much? It was 4,425 units to 5,320 units in the last 3 years. Okay, let's keep going. 8. What has happened to exports this year? We'll say exports have risen from 580 units to 1,800 units. Definitely a good thing. What limits to growth does the company face at the moment? And this one's pretty simple. That is, they can't recruit. The company needs skilled workers and unskilled workers and cannot recruit them. The company needs additional factory units and cannot rent them. That is the limits to their growth at the moment. Okay, so that was exercise B. Now let's take a look at exercise C, and we'll probably have to read this soon. So choosing the discourse structure. Read the assignment on the right. What kind of essay is required? Tick the correct one. Okay. So imagine you are a management consultant right here. The owner of Acme Limited is considering relocation from Costin to Bellport. She has asked you to write a report with the main arguments for and against relocation and a recommendation. Okay, so the kind of essay that we need is for and against. Basically means why and why not. Okay, so that is for and against. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have to read the essay here on the right, and then we'll number the paragraphs in the correct order in which they appear. So we'll have to label each one based on what it talks about. So which paragraph talks about purpose of report, which one talks about the points against and the points for, so basically why and why not, recommendation, and background. So here we go. Case Study 1. Relocation of ACME Limited. The purpose of this report is to make a recommendation to the owner of ACME Limited. The company is considering relocation from Coston to Bellport. In this report, I examine the case for and the case against relocation and make a recommendation. ACME Limited is a small engineering company. It is located in the small town of Coston, which has a population of 10,000 people. The company employs 14 people, including 3 skilled workers and 10 unskilled workers. The company occupies premises of 5,000 square meters. It imports raw materials by sea. It sells 75% of its finished goods to customers in Britain and exports 25% of its finished goods to Europe. The company is expanding rapidly. In the last year, total sales have increased by 46%. The company now needs skilled and unskilled workers to deal with the increase in demand. It also needs additional factory units but cannot rent them in Coston. There are several factors in favor of a move to Bellport. Firstly, ACME Limited should find it much easier to recruit staff in Bellport because the town is much larger than Coston. In addition, the unemployment rate in Bellport is 10%, whereas it is only 3% in Coston. Secondly, the company needs to acquire more factory space. There are more factory units to rent in Bellport than Coston. Thirdly, the company sells most of its finished goods inside Britain at the moment. There is a major motorway close to Bellport, which links the city to London and the rest of the country. Finally, there is a relocation grant of £2,000 per person. This is a government incentive to bring business to Bellport. There are also 2 factors against relocation to Bellport. Firstly, salaries are not as high in Coston as in Bellport. The company will pay about 25% more in salaries if they relocate. Secondly, rental costs of factory units are higher in Bellport than Coston. The company will pay 100% more in rent for the same size of unit. I recommend relocation to Bellport. The company will be able to recruit more staff and acquire additional factory space in the city. It will also benefit from cheaper import costs and cheaper transportation costs inside Britain. These benefits outweigh the drawbacks, which include higher salary costs and high rental costs. Okay, so now that we read the essay, let's label the paragraphs in the order in which they appear in. So we have purpose of report, points against, points for, recommendation, and background. Okay, let's start with number 1, which is purpose of report. So as you can see, oops, sorry about that. Let's go here for a minute. You can look in your book. So purpose of report, notice how the writer says, the purpose of this report is to make a recommendation to the owner of ACME Limited. The company is considering relocation from Coston to Bellport. So in this report, I examined the case for and the case against. This basically means the purpose of this whole report, okay? Second, we have the one that I noticed in the correct order. We have ACME Engineering is a small engineering company. It is located in the small town of Coston, which has a population of 10,000 people. That is basically giving us a little bit of a background about what the company is and what it does and where it stands and etc. Stuff like that. Okay, moving on, we have when they start talking about the points for as to why you should go. So there are several factories or why they should change places. There are several factors in favor of a move to Bellport. Firstly, ACME Engineering should find it much easier to recruit staff in Bellport, basically giving us all the advantages of why we should, well, like what would happen if we moved, or if the company moved to Bellport. Okay, so points for first. Then we have points against when the writer starts talking about there are also two factors against relocation to Bellport. First, salaries are not as high in Coston as in Bellport. Okay, so the company will pay about 25% more in salaries if they relocate, and they will pay about 100% more in rental costs. That is why not, or points against. And finally, we have recommendation. Basically, recommendation is just, why should you or why should you not, which I don't think the writer talks about too much here. So again, one more time, to label these, we'll start with purpose of report, 1, okay? And then 2 will be points for, 3 will be points against, and then we'll have, actually, sorry about that, let's start again. Purpose of report is number 1, background is second, I totally forgot about background, and then points for, and then points against, and finally, recommendation, okay? And yeah, so I think that was the first part of the writing section. Now let's move on. All right, you guys, so now let's move on to the second part of this writing section. Let's dive right in. Here we have exercise A, reviewing vocabulary. So we have choose 5 words from the box below and write 1 sentence for each to show the meaning. So let's write 5 sentences for 5 different words from the box here below. So we have employ, export, import, increase, make, occupy, recruit, and rent. Okay, so let's start with employ. I can probably say something like the company employs 14 people. Okay, for export, I'll probably say something like, this is based on the essay, by the way. I'll say it exports 25% of its finished goods to Europe. For import, the opposite of export, I'll say the company imports raw materials by sea. Then we have increase. So I'll say the company needs more workers to deal with the increase in demand. And then the word make, I'll say ACME Limited, that's the name of the company, ACME Limited can make more money in Bellport. You guys remember Bellport? And I'll probably say just one more here. The company currently occupies premises of 5,000 square meters. Okay, so that was the word occupy. All right, so now let's move on to exercise B. Read skills check 1. What kind of essay is type 3? How many sections does this type have? Okay, so let's take a look. Essay type 3, for and against. So this type of essay gives the arguments for and the arguments against a particular idea. And you guys remember, this is what we talked about, why and why not. So talking about the pros and the cons of a particular idea or like doing something. So the arguments for and the arguments against a particular idea. Let's take a look at the example here, assignment 4. The owners of Allen Homes are considering a house building project in Coston. They could continue building houses in Bellport instead. Write a report, give the points for and against Coston, then give your recommendation. And as you guys remember, the writing plan, the one that we talked about before, we have the purpose of essay, the background, and then the writer will probably talk about the points for, then points against, and finally make a recommendation. Okay, so now let's take a look at exercise B. What kind of essay is type 3? Like we said, it is for and against. And how many sections does this type have? It has 5 sections. Okay, so how many sections does this type have? It has 5 different sections, and it's called for and against. Okay, let's take a look at exercise C now. Organizing information. In which section of the essay do you expect to find each sentence below? Okay, so these are random sentences, but they do correlate with the 5 plans that we talked about, the writing plan, the purpose of essay, background, etc. So you'll probably, let's read number 1 and you guys will understand what I'm talking about. So 1, Allen Homes is a large construction company which employs 1,500 people. Okay, so based on what has just been said here, we're probably giving a little bit of a background. Okay, so I'm giving a little bit of a background. I'm telling people what Allen Homes is. So Allen Homes is a large construction company which employs 1,500 people. 2, land prices in Coston are much higher than in Bellport. This looks to be a negative, so that's a drawback. That means it's points against. 3, there are fewer houses to buy in Coston than in Bellport. That is points for it. That is a pro. That is something that we want. Okay, so that means points for. 4, in this report, I examined the case for and against a house building project in Coston. That is basically stating the purpose of this essay. And finally, 5, the company should build new houses in Coston because the demand is much higher in that location. This is basically a recommendation by the writer. Now, let's move on. Here we have exercise D. Read skills check 2. Which of these words can go with adjectives and which ones can go with nouns? Okay, so comparing with adjectives and nouns. So there are several common patterns for comparing things with adjectives and with nouns. So let's take a look at some of the examples here. We have Bellport is much larger than Coston. Coston is much more or less attractive than Bellport. So I can use adjectives to, establish a common pattern when comparing between things. So salaries are not nearly as high in Coston as in Bellport. And also with nouns, there is much less unemployment in Coston. Okay, the word unemployment. There are more factory units to rent in Bellport than in Coston. The unemployment rate in Bellport is 10%, whereas it is only 3% in Coston. Now let's go back now to exercise D. Which of these words can go with adjectives and which ones can go with nouns? Okay, so we have the words much, more, less, fewer, not as, dash, as, and you keep going. Okay, so the word much, as you can see, we can use much with both adjectives and nouns. So if you see here, Bellport is much larger than Coston. Okay, I can use it here, and I can also use it with nouns. So if I say there is much less unemployment in Coston, it is also correct. The word more, again, can be used with adjective and noun. So by the way, much, you'll tick adjective and you'll tick noun. And for more, you'll also tick adjective and tick noun. Because as you can see, more, or do I have more here? Yeah, I do. So there are more factory units to rent in Bellport than in Coston. Okay, more can be used with both adjectives and nouns as well, just like much. Okay, then we have the word less. Less can only be used with nouns, as we can see here. So there's much less unemployment in Coston. I can't use less with adjectives when it comes to comparing. Okay, then we have the word fewer. The word fewer can actually be used with both adjectives and nouns. So we'll tick adjectives and nouns as well. Now let's go to not as, dash, as, dash. So not as, and you keep going, is only used with adjectives. As you can see here, so salaries are not nearly as high in Coston as in Bellport. So we used not nearly as high in Coston as in Bellport. Okay, so used with adjectives. Okay, now let's go to exercise E. Writing comparison sentences. In your notebook, rewrite each sentence, use the words in brackets, but keep the same meaning. So we have words here, small, not, lower, fewer, much, and whereas. And we're going to rewrite each sentence, but keep the same meaning. So let's take a look. One is Bellport is much larger than Coston, and I want to say that, rewrite it in a different way using the word small. So I'll say Coston is much smaller than Bellport. 2, Coston is much more attractive than Bellport. Not. Okay, so I'll say Bellport is not as attractive as Coston. 3, there's less unemployment in Coston than in Bellport. Lower. So I'll say the unemployment rate is lower in Coston than in Bellport. 4, there are more factory units to rent in Bellport than in Coston, and the word fewer. So I'll say there are fewer factory units to rent in Coston than in Bellport. 5, salaries are not nearly as high in Coston, and the word much. So I'll say salaries are much lower in Coston. 6. While raw materials are imported by sea, finished goods are exported by air. I'll say raw materials are imported by sea, whereas finished goods are exported by air. Okay? So that was exercise E. Now let's move on. Here we have exercise F, identifying a new skill. Excuse me. Study the 3 sentences. What do they have in common? Actually, let's take a look at skills check 3 first. So we used the present continuous to describe trends. So changes that happen over a period of time. That is what a trend is. So we have started in the past, is happening now, and will probably continue to happen in the future. Example, sales at Acme Limited are rising at the moment. One more, I'm getting better marks in English now. My written English is improving. So all of these are basically examples of a trend, something that started in the past, is happening now, and will probably continue into the future. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Remember, we used the past simple to talk about complete events or situations. So when you want to use the past simple, remember that you're going to probably be talking about complete events or situations. 2, the present perfect to talk about events or situations up to the present, things that are up to the present, okay? Now let's go to exercise F. Study the 3 sentences. What do they have in common? A, sales at Acme are rising at the moment. B, sales at Acme rose last year. C, sales at Acme have risen in the last 3 years. Okay, so I'll say that what do they all have in common? Let's answer that one first. So I'll say that all 3 of these sentences, they all deal with change. Okay? Now that we've established that, let's go to F2 here. What is the tense of each verb, and what is the effect of changing the tense? Okay, so for 2, A, that'll be a present continuous. That means this is a trend. So sales at Acme are rising at the moment. It's a trend that's probably gonna, right, something that it started happening in the past, is happening now, and will probably continue in the future. Okay? B, sales at Acme rose last year. That means we're using past simple here, so that means that it is a completed event. And C, sales at Acme have risen in the last 3 years. So that means it is something that started in the past and continues up to the present. Okay? Present perfect. Now, let's go to exercise G. Complete the sales report with the present perfect or past simple of each verb. Okay, so before we do anything here, we have to go down here and take a look at the graph. So based on the graph, we can see Britain in blue, EU, and the rest of the world. Okay, we can see that the sales are, I'm guessing it's talking about sales. Yeah, so sales. For Britain, it's going up. Actually, it's going up really well. Okay, as you can see, so it starts at 140, and then it goes up to 170 or 168, and then it goes a little bit even more, but becomes a little bit more steady. But that's not the best thing, because if you see the rest of the EU greatly declines. Like, look at this decline. From 150, it goes down all the way to almost 115. Okay, so that's not good. That's not what you want. And for the rest of the world, as you can see, from around 175 maybe, it gradually again goes down at a normal rate, I'd say, but any decline is not good. So it goes down to about, I'd say, 165 or 166. So now let's put all of that in writing, what we just said. Okay, so complete the sales report with the present perfect or past simple of each verb. Okay, so here we have some verbs: rise, fall, sell, go down, drop, etc. And we're going to use perfect or past simple for each one. So let's take a look. Okay, so Bellport Goods Limited has not had a very good start to the year. In the last 5 months, sales to Britain have risen. Okay, so from the word rise, I'll say have risen from 139 to 172 per month. However, sales to the EU, and we have the word fall, so I'll say have fallen sharply since January. In the first month of the year, 151 units, and then we have the word sell, so I'll use were sold. Whereas last month we only, and then we have sell again, so I'll say sold 115. Sales to the rest of the world have also gone down. From the word go down, I'll change that to have also gone down slightly this year. Overall, the company, and then we have the word sell again, so I'll say sold 465 units in January. But monthly sales, and I have the word drop, so I'll say have now dropped to 452. Okay, so as you can see, we covered the graph itself in writing. Okay, so that is completing the report. And I think that's about it. Oh yeah, we have the vocab box. And by the way, for exercise H, this is just writing about general trends. So if you have high unemployment where you live, or prices, crime, medicine, all of these are, good trends that you can write about. Nothing too fancy. Maybe write something similar to this here. Anyway, let's take a look at the vocab box. Here we have attractive, construction, fall, fell, fallen, project, purpose, rise, rose, risen, trend, and where's. Okay, now let's move on. All right, you guys, so now let's move on to the final part of the writing section here. We have exercise A, previewing vocabulary. So pretty simple exercise. Find pairs of opposites in the box. Basically, find a word and its opposite. So we have the word advantage. It goes with disadvantage. Okay, so advantage, disadvantage. Then we have benefit. We'll go with drawback. So benefit, drawback. For, against, positive, negative, strength, and weakness. Okay, pretty simple. Now let's go to A2. Study the diagram in figure 1. Complete the text below with a suitable word in each space. So let's take a look at figure 1. It looks like we have a retail company of some sort. So we have a company called Superstores. Okay, we have a warehouse here, and it looks like we have 2 branches, and this is called a retail supply system. So now we're going to complete the text here with a suitable word. So Superstores Limited is a dash company. Like I said, it is a retail company. It has over 50, based on the different branches I'm seeing, I'm guessing it's the word branch. So it has over 50 branches across the south of England. The branches dash daily, we'll say are supplied. Okay, the branches are supplied daily. The goods are transported by, if you can see here, warehouse, supply, and it goes by road. Okay, so we'll say the goods are transported by road from a dash near London. We'll say a warehouse near London. Okay, now let's move on to exercise B, thinking and organizing. So we have studied the assignment on the right, complete the table for and against, look back at the information in lesson 3.9. So I'm not going to go look at it back, but if you want, it's right here. It's the very first part where we talk about, it was right here, the differences between cost and Bellport, the advantages and disadvantages of each one. But since you guys already, I'm hoping you already wrote an essay about it, we have the information that we need for this exercise. Okay, so let's study the assignment first. Management and Business Studies. Assignment 3, opening a new branch. So the owners of Superstores Limited are going to open a new branch. They are considering Bellport and Coston. They have asked you, a management consultant, so think of yourself as a management consultant, to write a report. The report should contain the main arguments for and against opening a branch in Bellport and make a recommendation. Okay, so based on the assignment, we're going to write an essay just like the one that we wrote before. We're going to use for and against. Okay, and remember, when we use for and against, we're probably going to write in the 5 sections that I'll talk about in a second. But for now, let's just complete this table here, the things that are for and against. Okay, so why is it a good idea for the owners of Superstores Limited to open a new branch in Bellport. Okay, so as we remember, it is easier. So right here, we'll say it is easier to recruit staff because obviously it is larger than Costin and it has a higher unemployment rate. Okay, let's move on. Let's again state all the advantages and then we'll go over the disadvantages. We'll also say that the company will get higher sales because obviously Bellport has a higher population. Let's do two more. So we have motorway closer to transport. So transport is cheaper. So transport is generally going to be cheaper in Bellport. Okay, I think 3 are good enough. Now let's go to against or disadvantages. So obviously the first one that I remember is salaries are going to be higher than in Costin. Okay, you're going to have to pay more. 2, rental costs of shops are a lot higher. So the rental costs in general are going to be a lot higher. And finally, there are going to be fewer shop units. Okay, so that was exercise B. Now let's take a look at exercise C, writing a for and against essay. All right, you guys remember, we're going to have to write one more. So like I said, we have to write the 5 sections when writing a for and against essay. So it starts with purpose of the essay, right? Background, points for, points against, and then you make a recommendation. Okay, so write a topic sentence for each paragraph. Write your report on page 99. So we're going to use page 99 here. As you can see, purpose of essay, background, points for, points against, and recommendation. Okay, use present continuous and present perfect to describe trends. Use the information in the table and graph on the right. Okay, so based on, again, I want you to take a good look at the table here before you start writing because this will help us write more in our essay and well, basically, it'll make the essay better because we'll have more points for, more points against, and we'll have a better overall recommendation. So we have year before last, the total sales, as you can see, it has been steadily going up. So the year before last, 734 units. Last year it was 865, and this year it was 1,056. Okay, and the increase from the year before last to last year has been 18, and the increase from last year to this year is 22%. So that's something to keep in mind when we write this down. Okay, so I have an essay that I'm going to write, that I'm actually going to read out for you guys. But before I do that, I want you to write your own. I don't want you to just copy what I have to say. So try and write your own essay and then listen to mine and see how, the difference between yours and mine and make any adjustments where you see fit. Okay, so let's start with the purpose of a report or essay. We'll say that the purpose of this essay is to make a recommendation to the management of Superstores Limited. The company is going to open a new branch. They are considering Bellport and Costin. In this report, I examine the case for and the case against Bellport and make a recommendation. Okay, so that was the purpose of essay. Now let's give a little bit of a background. Superstores is a large retail company. It has over 50 branches across the country. The company employs, on average, 10 people in each branch. All are unskilled except for the manager. And I actually got that from the notes here. We have location, branches, manager, 1 per branch, workers, 10 unskilled, and you guys can keep going. Okay, let's move on. All are unskilled except for the manager. On average, each branch occupies premises of 500 square meters. It is supplied daily by road from a warehouse near London. The company is expanding. In the last 3 years, total sales have increased from £734,000 to £1,056,000. Last year, sales rose by 18%, and this year they have gone up by 22%. Now that we got rid of the background, we're going to go for points for, okay? So let me just check just to make sure here that we're good. Okay, we're doing great. Okay, perfect. There are many factors in favor of opening a branch in Bellport. Okay, now I started in points 4, by the way, guys. So there are many factors in favor of opening a branch in Bellport. Firstly, it is easier to recruit staff in Bellport because the town is much larger than Coston. In addition, the unemployment rate in Bellport is 10%, whereas it is only 3% in Coston. Secondly, they will get higher sales in Bellport because the town has a much larger population. Thirdly, Superstore supplies its branches by road. The motorway from London is much closer to Bellport than Coston. Finally, there's a setup grant of £10,000 per unit in Bellport. This is a government incentive to bring business to the town. Now let's move on to the points against, or some of the drawbacks and disadvantages. So there are several factors against opening a branch in Bellport. Firstly, like we said, salaries are higher in Bellport. Secondly, rental costs of shop units are also higher there. Finally, there are fewer shop units in Bellport. Now let's move on to making a recommendation. I recommend opening the new branch in Bellport. The company will be able to recruit staff easily and attract a large number of customers. They will also benefit from cheaper transportation costs from their warehouse. These benefits are greater than the drawbacks, which include higher salary costs, higher rental costs, and the difficulty of finding a suitable shop unit. Okay, so that was the essay, you guys. And on that note, I think the writing section for this theme is over. So thank you for listening. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.